Hey everybody, we are here with Philip Gelatt and Morgan King, the two men behind the brilliant new movie, The Spine of Night, that is going to be premiering at South by Southwest on Thursday, March 18th, 8 p.m. Central Time. How are you guys?
Good.
Yeah, very good.
How are
Thank
you?
I'm fine. I'm caffeinated. I'm good to go. Um,
Fantastic.
okay, so I got to tell you, wow, this movie was fucking rad. Um, it was bursting with creativity, and I was just complete every couple of minutes I was blown away by something. So
Thank
Oh
you.
wow.
yeah, it was really cool. So how did this film come to be? Can you talk to me about this?
Sure. Yeah, we both are huge fans of like the sort of Ralph Bakshi heavy metal era of like adult animation, and I've been working in short films for a couple of years to sort of like refine the style to the point that there was enough of a workflow that we could even begin thinking about something feature length. And the Exordium short film made its way around. It did all right, making its way around the internet, and Phil stumbled upon that shortly thereafter.
Yeah, so I saw Exordium, which was Morgan's short film, and immediately was like, "Oh, I love this. This is exactly what I want to be doing. It's like a style of fantasy, a flavor of fantasy that I love, and that style of animation, you don't see it very often." So, I sent an email to Morgan I think just through your Facebook page. I don't even remember how we started talking, but I was like, "Hey, I love this. What do you want to do? Let's try to find something to work on together." So, pretty quickly after that we settled on, okay, let's try to make a feature. Let's try to make a feature set in the same world, and let's figure out how we do that. And that's really how it all started. That initial conversation, and the idea to take the short and grow it into this massive thing. So
Yeah, it a tough sell when you were trying to come up with funding, or I I can't imagine that it was overly easy.
yeah, well, so the movie is incredibly independent. So when we independently made and financed, so um, surprisingly, it wasn't, given that we weren't looking for a ton of money, it wasn't super hard to find it. But we also, I mean, yeah, as you say, like we knew not to ask for a lot of money. To be honest, one of the reasons I wanted to make this movie was because like I've been a screenwriter for a long time, and I figured nobody would ever let me make a fantasy movie at all, and certainly not a fantasy film like this. So when we when we set out to make it, the idea was always to like figure out a way in which we could make it as uncompromising and as much the thing that we wanted to make as possible. And that sort of figured into the way that we approached the financing too. Like we weren't going to go to any place that was like, well, we want to make it, but you have to, take out the gore and make it slightly less naked and maybe adjust this a
Slightly
bit. So
less naked.
yeah, slightly less naked was never part of the discussion.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely had an uncompromising vision and look, and there were even times, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it even felt like overwritten. Some of the dialogue was just hyper poetic and
That's
just
all
Yeah.
Morgan.
it was
I love purple prose. I just
just so good. The title alone was just like, what does that even mean? Now, talk to me, Phil, about. I was looking at your statement. You mentioned a connection between fantasy and horror.
Mhm.
Can you talk to me about that?
Sure. I mean, I like to think of those two genres. They're my two favorite genres. I love all of the sort of big nerd genres, but horror and fantasy in particular. And what I love about them is they feel to me like the closest to the human subconscious in a certain way, or like they're the genres that when done in the way that I love the most, allow you the greatest breadth of freedom, both visually and storytelling wise, and all those sorts of things. So to me, they're related in that way. They are like, not to be pretentious about it, but like they're the genres of dreams. like they can be wild and they can be free and they can be strange, and that's, I mean, that's my favorite part of them. So That to me, it really is the connection between them. And you know, I don't know that I would call Spine of Night a horror film. We've discussed it as such. I don't know if it reads as such, but there's certainly, I think both of our love of horror is a big part of the DNA of Spine of Night. Certainly, yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
even
Go ahead.
say that I think that in a lot of ways horror does fantasy better than fantasy does. Like where it really treats the imaginary as like something to be taken seriously instead of like something to be cataloged and comprehended. Like it lets it be fantastical in a way that like, oh, this is a griffin that I'm riding as a mount doesn't in so much fantasy. Whereas like you put a griffin in a horror movie, it's going to be terrifying. It's like
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
snapping beaks and everything. So, you know,
Morgan, you also talk about trying to recapture the glory days of rotoscope animation and Bakshi's work. How did you go about trying to do that?
well, I mean, watching the films a lot and trying to, you know, a lot of the scant behind the scenes footage of how they were making it and reverse engineering it as best as we could. With the short films, it was often like trying to shoot it in my Philadelphia row home around the furniture, which was extremely difficult. We had no space. And then by the time we got to working on the Spine of Night, Phil found us this absolutely wonderful, massive warehouse that we could just play around in to our heart's content. So it was both like the having the space and the willing people to get in there to really shoot all the footage we needed, and then just a lot of trial and error and experimenting to get the visual style as close as I could. I don't have a background in cartooning like Bakshi did, so there's some things where you can sort of tell he's bringing his pre-rotoscoping experience into it that I don't have, but I think we did a reasonable job of recreating the aesthetic.
Okay, so you didn't have any experience in animation, and you decided I'm going to rotoscope.
I mean, yeah, basically. I have a graphic design background, and I'd done some filmmaking in college, like live action film. But it was, yeah, I had a point in like my early 30s, really, where I was like, was so exhausted with graphic design and working with clients on projects that I hated, and I was like, I'm going to do a thing that is exactly the thing that I've always wanted to do, and it was like and recreating the fantasy animation from my youth that no one else seemed to be making. I was like, well, this is a thing I can learn how to do, and we'll see how far we can take it.
Yeah, and I'd like to talk to you about the process. You said that you got a huge warehouse. Did you just basically shoot everything there and then rotoscoped it?
Yeah, so we rented a warehouse space and then put a bunch of motion reference actors into costumes that were made out of like white sheets with black lines on them that would translate better to animation. Shot the whole movie. I mean, basically like you shoot a live action movie. We didn't have sets or anything, but we had lights and we had fake swords and fake shields and all that kind of stuff. Shot the whole movie live action. Cut it together as you would cut together a live action film. And then once we were happy with that cut, it's an amazing cut. It's utterly incomprehensible to anybody who doesn't know what the movie is. But to Morgan and I, it was like, there it is. It's the movie. And then we shipped it off to Morgan and a very, very small team of animators that we were able to put together. And that's how we did it. Yeah.
Yep.
Were the voice actors involved in the motion capture or no?
Only Betty Gabriel was there on set with us at the very beginning, and then because of the length of time that it took to animate this movie, we shot with her before she was in Get Out, before she was in any of the Blumhouse movies. So we as I said, I don't think she'll be embarrassed by me telling this. She graduated from Juilliard, I believe the same day, got on a train. We shot in Providence, got on a train in New York, came to Providence. I picked her up at the train station and we brought her to this warehouse to like shoot our crazy fantasy film. And she was I mean, she's fantastic. She's so talented, and we're so lucky to have gotten her then, and even more lucky to have like brought her back in to redo her dialogue now at the end of the process. So, other than her, no, it was motion reference, other actors, and then we brought the voice cast in at the end to do the voices. Yeah, yeah.
Wonderful. So
We
they
didn't
had.
drag Lucy Lawless to her house, so
I could just picture her in a white sheet and moving around. Yeah. Speaking
no.
of how did all these amazing people get involved with this project? I'm just like blown away. Patton Oswalt, Lucy Lawless. I mean, come on.
I mean, the short answer is we asked. The longer answer is we tried to pick people that we knew had either a personal love of the genre, like Joe Manganiello and Patton as well. Like Joe in particular has such a cachet in terms of D&D and also like what I would call extreme genre artwork. Like he has that t-shirt company Death Saves, and their whole thing is like sort of like badass like fantasy imagery on t-shirts. So he seemed like an obvious choice. Like, oh, that guy clearly will get what we're doing. And then for Lucy, I mean, because we approached them at the end of the process, it was a little bit easier than if we'd approached them at the beginning, because we were able to say, okay, here's, not only do we have a script for you to look at, we also can show you what the movie is going to look like, right? So they were able to see a large portion of the completed animation and sort of understand what we were after. But I'm still a little shocked that we were able to get this cast together. I mean, they're so fantastic, all of them. So yeah, we're very lucky.
That's remarkable. And then circling back, I was going to ask you how long the whole process took. I mean, you guys, you say that you were shooting before Get Out even happened. So how many years is that?
It's been almost
Go ahead.
exactly 7 years. It's like the end of March. So it's been 7 years since we started shooting, and we shot for 5 weeks. So almost, I mean, the bulk of that time has been animation. So
wow. Yeah. Well, it's a remarkable piece of work. It's you guys have to be excited that it's coming to South by and everyone's about to see this crazy thing. You've basically kind of created a unicorn of a movie. It's like ultra violent animated horror fantasy. This doesn't happen anymore. What would you tell other filmmakers that have a similar strong vision and are facing the same daunting task to get their film made? What would either of you tell them?
I mean, I think that there's at least from like the art side of it, like I approached it very much as like a graphic design problem. I think you can look at a lot of, I mean, Bakshi did a lot of stuff in his films to get them accomplished, but and his, I think, are also very uncompromised in the sense that he had a budget and a time limit. Probably you can tell in some of those, where especially like the Lord of the Rings, where he like clearly ran out of money at some point and just like, I don't know, use the live action. But I mean, I think there's always a stylistic approach to how you can solve these really hard problems of not having the, I mean, obviously you need some backing, but like, I think there's a lot of ways that you can simplify and abstract, and whether or not it's animation, like there's so many approaches to like telling a story, a fantasy story, that uses its limitations to get around those hurdles. You can do an independent project. Like, did you see that? I forget the director's name, but Headhunter. Did you see that? It's on Shudder. There's a
No.
oh
I
yeah,
have to look it up.
It's great. Yeah.
It's very like one character, like a horror fantasy, and it's evocative of this whole big world. And like I feel like that's one to check out.
Definitely then. And Philip, what would you say to somebody?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's there's so many pieces of advice that one could give. I guess I would say, like, to do something this ambitious, one thing is to sort of like, it's to the film's advantage ultimately that it took 7 years, because it allowed us to make, like, it's very rare to make a movie where you have that much time to consider every creative decision. So one thing I would say is don't be afraid to take a very long time to get a thing done, especially if you don't have a lot of money and and resources. Like one thing you might be able to muster is time, and that certainly is a thing. I mean, it's super valuable. I'm just thinking of like any film set, like the first thing you learn is like, oh, time is the most important thing because everything's going to take longer than you think, and you're going to be rushed to make decisions and all that kind of stuff. So just thinking about that as a resource to be used, and not to think that you have to, like, complete a film in a week. Like it's okay if it takes a while, especially if you have something incredibly ambitious that you want to do and you want it to be a certain way.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, again, thank you for creating something so audacious and crazy. I had a lot of fun watching it. It was insane.
That's awesome.
Thank you so
So
much.
the very best of luck to you guys on your premiere. And again, The Spine of Night comes out or premieres at South by Southwest Online Thursday, March 18th, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. Get that right. All right, guys. Thank you, Phil, Morgan. Thank you so much for coming on and talking to us. Best of luck.